So, as Malvik has introduced, I am a criminal practicing lawyer, and I am based in Bombay, and so is my work. Without wasting a lot of time, I would like to move towards our topic for today, that is drafting, pleading, and conveyancing. So, let's just introduce these concepts to ourselves. Uh, as far as drafting is concerned, in a very informal language, if I have to tell you, drafting is basically the process of creating a legal document which you shall be submitting in court or which can be executed or is enforceable. Whereas conveyancing is particularly drafting documents relating to transfer of property rights or transferring of legal rights or any property related documents. So today, in today's seminar, I will be focusing on drafting, which are documents that we usually submit in court and file in court, and what are the contents which you should always keep in mind while you are drafting any legal document. Now, moving ahead, every other court, like either you take the High Court or the Supreme Court, every court has a different format for drafting. They will have their own rules. For example, we have the Bombay High Court appellate side rules, and the Bombay High Court appellate side rules define how they want a particular draft. So they will mention the margins that need to be used, the font that needs to be used, and the font size that needs to be used, how many number of pages will be accepted. So all of these things are subjective to which high court you're particularly drafting or submitting a document in. As far as Bombay High Court rules are considered, I'll be focusing majorly with that, assuming that a lot of you students are practicing in Bombay or are from Bombay. But Bombay High Court rules are very common, and as far as other high courts are considered, they're not very different from our rules. So I'll be focusing around like those rules more. Let us discuss what kind of applications we are usually dealing with while we are drafting documents for the criminal side of law. Either it can be in the lower court, either it can be in the trial court, sessions court, or high court. So the first thing that usually comes in every law student's mind is a bail application or an anticipatory bail application. But before we move to a bail or an anticipatory bail, there is usually a remand application that is also filed by the police. Now, what is a remand application? A remand application is so by the process of law, every time a person gets arrested, it is mandatory that he is presented before the magistrate in the next 24 hours. Now we are aware about it. But does the person immediately move to judicial custody after 24 hours? No. He's granted a 15-day police custody. And in 15 days of police custody is called, this is where the police will submit a remand application and he's remanded to police custody. That is what's called the remand application. Now, at this point of time, as defense lawyers, all we have is a right to reply to the remand application and oppose the same, that the person should not be sent for remand. So the first application that we usually file is a reply to the remand application stating how your client, whoever you're representing, is not involved prima facie in the crime. Now, why is it important for us to do so, and why is the remand application important? Because this will decide if your client has, if the prosecution has been able to prove a prima facie case, then your client will be definitely going to judicial custody, because the purpose of sending your client to a remand custody and then judicial custody is for the purpose of investigation. So you in your draft will clearly mention the how the person is prima facie not involved, and second, how his judicial custody or his custody in person is not required. That can be done by proving his good conduct, his bona fide interests in cooperation and investigation, that he is not a flight risk, that whenever the police wants him, he will come down to the police station for the purpose of investigation. That is majorly what we write in a remand application, that he is not a flight risk and that he has bona fide interests, and that he will be cooperative with the police. The moment you prove this to the judge, through your, because that is the first document the judge will be reading even before hearing your arguments. Now that is the case with every draft. If you see, the before your oral arguments, the judge will go through your pleadings, and there is no doubt about it. Even if you go before the high court, if before your matter is listed, a day prior to that, the judge receives your file and the judge is going to go through your matter. Now, when the judge is going through it, the judge has already created an impression in his head about you, about the lawyer who has drafted it. And based on that, he will decide, he will subconsciously decide how much importance he has to give to you and your argument or not. That is why drafting is extremely important, and it needs to happen in a very formatted way so that it looks good to the judge to read and it makes sense to the judge. If it is not making sense to him, he's not going to waste the court's time to give you enough time to argue your case. Whatever you are going to argue needs to be limited to your drafting, needs to be limited to the draft that you have submitted. That is why a draft needs to be extremely exhaustive in nature. Not even very exhaustive. I'm not asking you to make a 50-60 page or draft, but all the important points that you wish to argue later during the court hearings, you need to mention them in your pleadings. It is very important. So, like we were discussing the remand application, it's a very basic document. It can be a 2 page or reply as well, because once a client is arrested, you do not have a lot of time with the client to discuss. So anyway, a remand application is very weak from the defense attorney's point of view. That is why you need to mention the two important things that I've already told you. That one, he's not a flight risk, and second, that he'll be very cooperative with the investigation. Hence, his custody is not required. Now, moving ahead, we'll have something called as a bail application. Now, in bail application, there are a few formats that I'll be discussing with you, and a particular way in which a bail application or an anticipatory bail application needs to be drafted. Let me explain to you what ancillary pages are before. Okay, now ancillary pages are the set of documents that are before your main pleading start. So it consists of one, the index of the document, two, the synopsis of the document. Okay. Now, index is very clear that you'll write memo of the application as the first one, and then you'll have whatever annexures you're annexing, annexure A, B, C, D. It can be copy of the FIR, copy of the charge sheet, any particular order you're referring of the lower court or any other court, or his medical reports, for example. Any document that you're annexing to the main pleading, that will be mentioned in the index. That is the first page that goes. Now, second is something called the synopsis. Now, in the synopsis, one, we have a summary in brief. Second, we have list of dates and events. Third, we have points to be urged. Fourth, we have acts that we are referring. And fifth, any judicial precedent that we wish to mention. Now, it is not mandatory that you write points to be urged in judicial precedents in your synopsis itself. You can write as urged in the memo of the application or as urged in the writ petition, that you can write. But summary in brief, list and dates and events, and the acts that you're referring are mandatory to be written, at least in the Bombay High Court. Now, when you go to Supreme Court, you have to write all of these 5 points. You have to write points in urged, in sub points, and a very concise manner of all your grounds of the pleadings. Okay, so one we were discussing is a summary in brief. So what do you basically write in the summary in brief? For example, if you're filing a bail application, then you write that the present applicant is filing this bail application, or because the present applicant has been apprehended as an accused in so and so sections of so and so act, and that he's in the judicial custody for XYZ number of years or months, or that, and his lower court bail application has already been rejected, or if this is his first or second bail application, something that is going to let the judge know, okay, this is the case. Fine, let's move ahead. Then will come a list of dates and events. For example, the day when the offense was committed. Second, when he was arrested. Third, when was a charge sheet filed. Fourth, like when he came to Mumbai, or etc., etc., etc. So list of dates and events is basically the date and what particulars happened on that date. Now, this needs to be in a very chronological order, because it's simpler for the lawyer arguing to explain to the judge that A, B, C had happened, and it is easier to form a chain of thought for the judge as well. Now, if you don't have a list of dates and events managed properly, it will confuse the judge, because somewhere you're mentioning year 2024, then you're mentioning year 2023, and then you're coming back to June 2024. So judge will be like, okay, what is happening? Where am I getting confused? Then he'll get irritated and he'll be like, okay, what next date? Because you have to understand that the judge will have around 60, 70 matters on board. He does not have the time in real sense to actually give so much time to you so that you keep explaining these minor irregularities or inconsistencies of your draft. So it is very important that your list and dates and events are very chronologically arranged. All of this is usually made in a tabular format, and it's advised that it is made in a tabular format so that they look good and they look appealing to the eyes of the judge who is reading it. For example, if you have a document in your hand, okay, and everything is just scribbled, it will be very difficult for you also to understand, okay, what is happening where, which point is written where. So imagine a judge who reads more than 50, 60 applications a day prior. So he'll also get confused. He'll be like, okay, I don't want to give so much importance to serial number 22. Okay, fine, whatever his pleadings are, just fine. So it's important that your draft is appealing to the eyes of the judge. So it's aesthetic. You maintain a proper font. The font that you're using is unilateral. Okay, it's not font size 14 for XYZ things, and then you come down to 12 and then 13, and there's a mismatch, or the two different types of fonts that you've been using. So it's important that important parts are bold and italic and highlighted. So it looks good to the judge as well. Okay, fine. He knows his eyes catch the right important words you want him to focus on. So it's important. Now moving to points to be urged. Now points to be urged are the summary of your grounds. For example, you will have around 20 grounds written in your bail application. You do not have to write all the 20 grounds in your points to be urged. All you need to write is maybe 5 major points or headings of those points. One, that he's not a flight risk, probably. Second, that he has deep roots in the society. Third, that he has a medical ground. Fourth, that he's been cooperating with the investigation throughout. Like if he's that he was arraigned as an accused in any other case as well, he was cooperative there as well. Now, if you see these investigating agencies these days, there is an ED case also going on. There is a CBI case also going on. So, for example, if he has not been arraigned as an accused by ED, but he's apparently been arraigned as an accused by CBI, then you can write that he was cooperative with the Directorate of Enforcement. Now that becomes a ground, so that you tell the judge that my client is a very cooperative human being. So his custody in jail is not required. Now we come to the acts that you're referring. So acts that you're referring are all the acts that you have mentioned in your pleadings. The Constitution of India, the like BNSS if you want to write. Then you can write IPC if you're it can be Prevention of Corruption Act. Whichever acts are mentioned by you in the pleadings need to be written in your acts to be referred. And judicial precedents, basically a lot of lawyers, like majority of the lawyers, have a habit of adding one or the other case law in their drafts as a judicial precedent to refer to it, to rely on it. So lawyers do write while you are in your ancillary pages itself, but it's not mandatory as such. Moving forward to what actually consists of the pleadings. Now, when you start drafting your pleadings, you have to basically in the format write that before the honorable. For example, the cause title of your draft is extremely important. It has to be written to the right forum, to the right jurisdiction, and the right case type. Now, what is the right forum? For example, if you're writing in Bombay, if you're filing this application in Bombay High Court, so you write before the honorable judicature, before the honorable High Court of Judicature at Bombay. Then you'll write if it's a criminal application, so it will be criminal appellate jurisdiction. So you write criminal appellate jurisdiction. Before that, if it's a criminal writ petition, so you write case type is the type of the case type is basically either it's a bail application or a writ petition or a criminal revision application or a criminal application. So those are case types. So you'll write, and all of these differ from court to court, by the way. So before you're drafting for a particular high court, I would advise that you always go and check on every high court's website. There's a case type list that is given. So you just go and you check from there that okay, here they call it criminal revision application or criminal application or whatever. So you write that and you leave a blank for the number for the registry to give you a number and of the year 2025. So criminal writ petition dash of 2025. Then you come to the part where you write the parties. Now in Bombay High Court, it is mandatory that you write the district as well. Why is it mandatory? Let me explain it to you. Because we have more than four, like we have total four benches, the principal bench and three other benches. And all of these benches have different districts in their jurisdiction. So for example, Bombay High Court has we'll have Pune, we'll have Raigad, we'll have Daman and Diu, and we have Bombay. So you'll write the district Mumbai, Mumbai suburban, district Thane, district Pune, wherever the case arose, wherever the cause of action of the case is, you write that particular district. Then you'll write the name of the parties. For example, if it is Vidhi Rathi versus the state of Maharashtra. So Vidhi Rathi is the applicant versus the state of Maharashtra. Now, it is important that you write that state of Maharashtra through the public prosecutor. Or, for example, if it is a case against the economic offences wing. So, state of Maharashtra through the economic offences wing, Mumbai, those are the respondents. So that there can be one or two or three respondents. So, in cases of Directorate of Enforcement, we usually write Vidhi Rathi versus one Directorate of Enforcement, two the Union of India, three the state of Maharashtra. Union of India and state of Maharashtra are the formal parties because Directorate of Enforcement is a central investigating agency. So writing formal parties is equally important. So again, that is because Bombay High Court wants a formal party to be written. That is our rule. So we write it that way. There are a lot of high courts that have seen that they do not have any formal party as such, or it's not mandatory there. So always write whatever investigating agency or the police station you're against. Now, for example, there's a case registered against me in Santa Cruz police station. So you'll write Vidhi Rathi versus the state of Maharashtra through Santa Cruz police station. So through whichever police station is, you have to mention it. Okay. Then comes the part where we start with our pleadings. So in the pleadings, we first write about what this application is, which section of which statute this application is being filed under, and who the applicant is. So you'll have to tell the judge that I am the applicant and what do I do? For example, if I was not a lawyer, I was going to be a fashion designer student. Let's take an example. So I'll write that the applicant herein is a 20-year-old girl studying at the Institute of Fashion Designing, so and so, and is arrested for the offense of so and so of these statutes. Then comes the part where you write about me. So because you want the judge to give a favorable order in my favor, you will want to highlight my good things. So that I'm a meritorious student, or that I don't have any criminal antecedents, that I'm a good girl with good values, etc. You'll just hype your client up a little and put all the good things about him. So when the judge is reading, the judge makes an opinion, okay, fine, she's a nice person. So there is a chance that she might have not committed this crime. So this is what you're trying to put in the judge's head. So that is why it's important that you write the character of the person in a very good way. Then we come to the facts of the case. Then you'll write that the present application has been filed, leading to the following facts. And then you'll write Vidhi started studying at XYZ Institute. Proceeding, then this incident happened, then you write the exact chain of thought that we usually write, that A happened, then B happened, then C happened, then D happened. And after D happened, she got arrested. Okay. So this is how you write the facts. You will have a proper chronology in your facts as well. So that while the judge is reading it, he is reading it in a form of a story. Now, let's take it from a very psychological point of view. Okay. You have to read something. Will you be interested in reading it if you're not able to frame a chain of thought? You'll be like, अरे ठीक है, अच्छा फिर ये भी हो गया, अच्छा ठीक है, whatever. You're not interested in. You can only get a judge to give you a favorable order if you interest the judge in it, right? So you'll always make a story. Okay, this happened, and then she went here, then she went there. And then this incident took place, XYZ incident took place, and because Vidhi was present at the place of incident, she got arrested. So the judge would be like, oh fine, so this is the chain of thought. So based on your chain of thought that he develops through facts is where your grounds will help. So after you write the facts will come the grounds. You will write one. Now grounds differ from each case to the other. Okay. um if it's a bail application, you will write why the custody is not required, because the entire reason you are not trying to quash the proceeding against me. Okay, you're just trying to get me out of the jail. So you will write that why my custody in jail is not required. So that is because I have deep roots in Mumbai. I am settled here. I have a property in Mumbai. I have my family living in Mumbai. Where will I go? All I have, everything is settled for me in Mumbai. So you will say that she has deep roots in Indian society or she has deep roots in Mumbai. So whenever the Santa Cruz police station wants her presence, she will be available to go and assist for investigation. Second, you will show that I have good intentions to cooperate with investigation. If you don't show the judge that you are going to be cooperative, he's not going to grant you that, because he'll be like, ठीक है वरना तो उसको जेल से ही जाने दो investigation के लिए हर बार. You have to make sure that you're writing grounds that can get me out of the jail. And let's restrict your grounds only to that aspect when you're filing a bail application. And there are a lot of issues that need to be dealt with while during the stage of trial. Do not press on those grounds at all. Okay. Was she present? Was she not present? My alibi, XYZ. These are things that need to be discussed during the trial of a case and not during bail application. So restrict your bail application only to the grounds proving that my custody in jail is not required anymore. One of the strongest grounds is if the charge sheet has been filed. Now, basics of criminal jurisprudence is when is a charge sheet filed? When the investigation is over. So, and when the police files its charge sheet, it means that the police has completed its investigation, has asked the witnesses whatever they wanted to, or have examined the accused and everybody. Then why is my custody required? Is the prime question, because you wanted me for investigation for me to cooperate. The investigation is completed. Let me out on bail now. Whenever for the further investigation, if police requires me, I will assist. But this that custody not required, or that the charge sheet has been completed, if the charge sheet has actually been completed in your particular case, always highlight this, and you'll find multiple judgments supporting this particular cause. So based on these, your bail application needs to be, your grounds will come. One of the major grounds people take is medical issues. There are a lot of people who suffer some of the other kind of medical issue and they would want to be out. Yeah, and as far as we were discussing judicial precedents, the judicial precedents are mentioned during the grounds. So you will have to relate the particular judicial precedent you're using, the facts of that particular judicial precedent to your particular case. You will have to make a pari materia reference, and then you need to mention it. And the last thing that you always mention is the prayers or the relief that you're seeking. One, that so and so accused be out on bail. And second, any interim or ad interim reliefs that you're seeking. Now, this is a particular structure in which you need to draft a bail application. The structure remains the same for a writ petition also. So you will write about the petitioner, the facts, the grounds, and the press with the ancillary pages. Now, this is about a writ petition. Now, in writ petitions, there are types of writ petitions that you're filing. One is only under article, if you're filing it in before the High Court, then it's only under Article 226 of the Constitution. The prayers that you seek in 226 are very different than the prayers that you're seeking in cases where 226 and 482 of CRPC or 528 of BNSS is considered, because 482 and 528 of BNS, 482 of CRPC and 528 of BNSS are the inherent powers given to the High Courts, which means that the High Court has a power, for example, in case of writ of certiorari, to quash and set aside a particular impugned order, impugned notification, or proceedings, FIR, charge sheet, or investigation. It can be in cases of a writ of mandamus that the High Court has the power to direct any investigating authority or any government official to, for whatever reasons, any direction can be provided. So it's important that your 482 and 226, the grounds and prayers that you're seeking in these particular writ petitions are different than what you're only seeking under 226 of the Constitution. So always make sure that you're writing it in the particular format and in particular grounds and prayers as discussed with your senior. Now, can a writ petition be filed in 226 only in the criminal appellate side? No. It can be filed on the original side as well, because the High Court has an original jurisdiction, and it can also be filed on the civil appellate jurisdiction. Depends on the facts of your case. You have to very well understand the jurisdiction you are approaching. For example, there is this bank called I will not name any bank here, but let's just assume there's a bank named XYZ. Okay. Now this bank has has opened a lookout circular against you because there is a complaint they have filed with the Central Bureau of Investigation, and there's a lookout circular issued by the bank. Now, by the case of Virat Chetan Shah versus Union of India, the lookout circulars issued by banks were basically quashed because they're like, the banks do not have the authority, according to the Office Memorandum of 2021, to issue lookout circulars. But let's just hypothetically sorry, yeah. So just hypothetically, let's assume that it is still allowed that lookout circulars can be issued by banks. So that time it will not be criminal appellate jurisdiction, it will be civil appellate jurisdiction, because the banks are seeking recovery of their amount. They are not seeking a penal provision against you. So you have to be very careful about which jurisdiction are you actually approaching in to write your and to file your draft. These are major aspects that we should always keep in mind before we're drafting. The content of the draft is important, as important it is that you're approaching the right jurisdiction, because the judge on the first instance will be like, I'm sorry, this is not my jurisdiction to deal with. If you're filing a civil matter before a judge who has a criminal assignment, he's just going to dismiss your case on the first hearing without even issuing notice to the respondents. So always be very careful about the jurisdiction. Know about your jurisdiction before you're drafting. These are your pre-preps for drafting. Okay. Drafting is a skill. You are not born with it. Okay, you have to develop it. I am learning drafting on an everyday basis. And the more you draft, the better you get. You will never have a perfect draft in front of you. There are so many seniors who still will make some or the other mistake in their draft. I've seen so many judges shout at junior counsels and senior counsels also, but what draft is this? Because it is a very subjective thing. Drafting has that is why if you see any high court, they only have a particular set of rules, but how you draft it is up to you. So always approach your senior, whoever you're working with, and ask them if there's a particular format they want their draft in, or if there are particular points that they want you to mention in your draft, based on which whatever pleadings you're making, make sure you include those and consider the opinions of your seniors. Now, apart from that, let us understand why we are whatever we are drafting, why is it so important, and why does it have to be in a particular way? Because you are not the only one appearing before a particular judge. Okay, there are thousands of people appearing before him in a course of time. If the judge does not have uniformity, he will be very disturbed while reading particular documents. That is why there are rules set out to make things uniform in nature, and always abide by it. And the reason I'm asking you to always follow the rules is the registry will never accept your draft in case the rules are not followed. So be updated. always with whichever high court you're working in, of what drafts, what are the particular rules of filing, what are the particular rules of drafting, and always draft your documents in a particular way. So while I first started drafting for Delhi High Court, I did not know it. So I went to the Delhi High Court's website and I checked, okay, these are their particular rules. This is how they like their margin. Whereas if you compare, Delhi High Court has a very simpler format for drafting. Bombay High Court is very strict and stringent with their drafting rules, whereas Delhi is not at all. It is a very freehand drafting procedure. Whereas Bombay High Court, you'll have to maintain a margin of 2.5 from the left and 1.3 from the right, top margin, below margin, and all of these things. The font size, the which font you have to use, Times New Roman, font size 13. You have to be very particular. But Delhi High Court is not at all like that. So every other High Court has simpler format. Whereas Supreme Court is considered, Supreme Court is extremely stringent. You cannot have a synopsis of more than, I think, more than 7 pages in a special leave petition in Supreme Court. Now, in Supreme Court, your bail applications have a different format, special leave petitions have a different one, and your writ petitions have a different one. So always check the updated drafting rules before you're drafting. The contents of drafting, your language need to be very apt. Please check your grammar before you're submitting any draft. If you think that you are not equipped enough to check your grammar, if you have any doubts, please use websites where you can check your grammar, or take help of your seniors or colleagues. But do not hesitate, because if it gets filed and if the judge points it out, then it is going to be very embarrassing in court if you do not use proper grammar and proper English. Unfortunately, all the high courts, we have to properly use a very formatted and advanced English. Lower court applications, a lot of applications still go in your vernacular language. For example, in Maharashtra, there are so many documents that are still filed in Marathi in the lower courts. But now that is also changing. If you are filing something in Marathi, you have to give a translated copy as well. So just be very thorough with your case before you're drafting, before you sit to draft. Always make sure that you have one conference with your client and note down all what you had to ask. Because if you have to file a writ petition, for example, in case of if I have to file a writ petition to quash the order of maintenance granted by the family court, and I'm a new counsel, the client had a different counsel in the lower court and in the family court, and has a different counsel who is me in the high court. So I will sit with the client and ask the very basic question: when did you get married? How did you meet your husband? Like, okay, you met through an arranged marriage concept. Okay, was there any gifts given in form of dowry or not? So what was the amount of it? What was your courtship period? Because when the judge asks me all these questions, I want these things to be written in my draft. So it needs to be a complete draft. It does not have to be too, a 20-pager draft is also a complete draft, and a 50-pager draft is also an incomplete draft. It needs to have the right contents, and that can only happen when you speak to your client thoroughly. Please, before you start drafting, discuss with your client and share your draft with the client. This is what I am drafting. If there are any factual inconsistencies, kindly correct them and let me know. Because there are times they'll give you some wrong information. No, we did not go to Spain in this year. We went to Spain in XYZ year. So just be very correct with your facts, and always have a client conference before you start drafting, and just don't randomly sit and start drafting. Always have abundant information for you to start drafting. These were very basic tips that are required but need to be followed. So if you have any further doubts as far as any particular document is concerned, I would request you all to raise your questions so I can deal with them.
Thank you so much, Vidhi, for this wonderful session. Participants, in case y'all have any queries, so y'all can either use the raise hand function or write it in the chat box. So, Vidhi, there's one question: how to avoid ambiguity?
How to avoid ambiguity in a draft will only happen when you know the facts by yourselves. If you know your facts, if you're very thorough with your facts, is when you will make sure that it's written in a particular format, and there'll be no ambiguity in your draft then, because you are aware about it. The one who's drafting it is aware. And obviously, you should know your law also for grounds. So just thoroughly know whatever you're writing. Just be clear in your head. And if you're not thorough about the law or the facts, you can always re-question or reread the law before you write it in the draft.
Okay. Uh, the next question is there any checklist that one can make use of?
Um, checklist. Okay. So again, your checklist will depend on the type of the case you're filing. Okay. For example, all the checklist I particularly follow is having all, I know the type of documents I want to submit with my draft. So I obviously make a checklist about it. Do I have these documents that are mandatory to be uploaded with the draft? The facts, do I have the entire chain of thought prepared wherever I think that I'm not thorough with the facts. So a checklist will basically depend on how thorough you are with the facts from the client. That is why I suggested that you should always have a client conference.
Okay, there's a participant raising hand, just unmuting the participant.
Ma'am, thank you for a very nice, informative session. Um, Seems there are a lot of formats, procedures, and so on. So obviously, anybody who wants to, put up a case in High Court needs to be either well versed or he has to do some juniorship. Um, are there any books whereby we can get these formats and get acquainted with those?
Yes, I have a list of books that I had once referred in my final year. Is it okay if I share it with Malvika and then she forwards it?
Yes, please.
Yes, I
Sure,
do have.
sure, Vidya.
I have three authors, and I'm sorry, I'm not able to recall their names, but I have three books, and we have the same set of books in our office also. So I'll share those names with you, Malvika, the book and their authors, and the same can be referred.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions, participants?
Malvika, there's a participant named Anamika who's raising her hand.
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah. We'll just unmute the participant.
Ma'am, I had just one question that whether these references which the earlier participant was talking about, these references will be shared by all or only to him?
I will share it with Malvika, and I think she can share with all of you as well.
Okay, ma'am. Even I need it because that's why I was telling you about it.
Malvika, if you can please do the needful.
Sure, sure, sure. Ma'am, please message me a message us on a plea WhatsApp number. We'll share it with you.
Also, if you go through the BEAR Acts participants, at the end of the BEAR Act, there are application formats and forms also mentioned. So, if you go through the BEAR Act of CRPC for BNSS now, at the end of BNSS form number 1, form number 2, there are forms also mentioned, and the contents of that particular application are also there. So, that is just very basic one, but those are there as well, and I'll also be sharing with Malvika the three books that I've been talking.
I think
Anybody?
she went on mute. Yeah, so Vidya, I've opened the questions from the registration form. Can I take these?
Yes, please.
Yes. So what are the most common errors that occur?
Most common errors that occur are one, that there is no proper flow to the uh, draft. The flow in which you are drafting, like for example, the chronological order, that needs to be always corrected. Always reread your draft again and again. You can reread your draft 10 times also before finalizing it. It's okay because it is going to be your entire argument. It is a written argument only. You can consider it as one. So please maintain a proper flow. Second, grammar is not used correctly and appropriately. Third, we one of the errors, I won't call it an error, but a habit that we have forgotten is we have stopped using a lot of Latin maxims in our drafts. So, as law students, the first thing in the first year in legal English we are taught are Latin maxims. So that can be something as simple as actus non facietem nisi mensitria. If you're drafting any criminal application, if you see my drafts, I always write according to criminal jurisprudence and actus non facietem nisi mensitria. Always use Latin maxims because that makes you different from a layman. If you go and talk this phrase to a layman, he will never understand. But if I'm telling this to you, you understand what I'm talking about. That creates a very different impression on judge. So that is a very smaller brownie point advice. It's not a mistake that always occurs, but we have stopped using it. So grammar always check. The flow, annexures are not properly attached or marked, so always mark them properly. Your grounds are not highlighted properly. So, for example, I've read drafts where a person was talking about one health ground, then he went on to maybe he's not a flight risk, and after 4 grounds, he'll come back to okay, the person also suffers from so and so, so and so. Don't do that. If there are 3 health issues that the person is facing, please combine them together under one subheading: health grounds. Cooperative with other investigating agencies, for example. So, uh, always make sure that your grounds are also formatted properly. One, that error always happens is that you have not formatted your document. Always have your document in justified format and the proper font and font size. And according to rules, whatever the margins. So always check that. So majorly these are issues that commoners face. And one very, very small mistake that I've always noticed in drafts is we forget to write Honorable Bombay High Court, Honorable Supreme Court. We just said the Bombay High Court in the case of so and so. The Honorable Bombay High Court or the Honorable Supreme Court, or if it's the lower court, then you write the Learned Triumph Court, or the Learned Supreme, the Learned Special Court, or whatever. So these small things does matter, according to me at least.
Okay. And Vidhi, how do we ensure that our draft is compliant with the relevant law?
Uh, like I said, you need to know the law. Just please don't start drafting. Read the law, read commentaries, read as much as you can before you start drafting. If you are drafting case for the offense of, for example, murder, so read the ingredients of murder or whatever. Just read your law one very, very well. uh, the more you draft, the better you get. So your first draft, you'll feel that it's not very compliant, but maybe your fourth one will be. In case you are stuck, always seek help of your seniors, of your mentors, colleagues, because your draft can only be compliant to the law after you have read the law thoroughly and you have used the particular sections in the right way. So, for example, if there is a case of cheating under 420 of IPC, then let's assume it is a case of bail again. Let's assume you're drafting a bail application. You'll have to write how the ingredients of 420 were not satisfied. So mention the ingredients of the particular section you're filing it under and how, one, you have a locus standi for filing this, and second, how is the particular forum you're filing it has the appropriate jurisdiction of doing so, of adjudicating on the matter, basically.
Okay. The next question, how can a law student improvise their drafting skill?
The more you draft, the better you get. Everybody's improvising on their drafting skill. It's not that senior counsels are an expert in drafting or something. Everybody's learning. As law students and as students of law, we are learning it on an everyday basis. So I am improvising on my drafts. So are my seniors. The more you draft, the better you get. But if you are a law student, I would suggest that start taking up drafting work at your internships from the very beginning. A lot of places will not give you drafting work. So kindly insist on them. Can I please just draft a reply or a rejoinder, if not the main application? Can I draft a precipice? Or can I just draft an adjournment application? Can I just draft an exemption application? The basics of applications are also okay, but just take up as much drafting work as you can as a law intern.
Okay. And the next question is how to work on one's legal language.
I would suggest, this is what my senior told me, read more judgments. So I really like this about Supreme Court. They have now a repository where they have summarized the judgments and given. So they give you the judgment, the link to the actual judgment, and they also have summarized it. So read as many judgments as you can and read commentaries. Please just do not rely on Live Law and Bar and Bench. They are extremely good places to have updates about law, but read not just through Live Law and Bar and Bench. Kindly read the entire orders, judgments, read commentaries. There are so many books. For criminal law, I would 100% suggest reading Ratan Lal and Dheeraj Lal. Very nice. Read as many books you can. Content. You need to read content to improvise the legal language. Judgments of, there are so many, there are all the judges, I would say, they write so beautifully. So read. If you want to read a few good judgments of Supreme Court, the CJI right now, the Justice Sanjeev Khanna, Justice Bela Trivedi, former Justice Chandrachud, all of their judgments are beautifully written. You can read Justice Oak's judgments; they're very nicely written. If you want to read very polished English judgments or orders, read of Justice G.S. Patel of Bombay High Court. Very, very polished and advanced English. So, I mean, those are people I usually read of. But yes, read more judgments.
Nice. Thank you so much. There's one question in the chat box. Are there any websites that give updates about the, the new drafting rules? And just a second, I'm just combining the two questions. Sorry. Vidhi, are there any websites that give us updates about the new drafting rules and also give the samples?
I'm sorry, I do not know about any websites, or there are no any websites I particularly refer to, because the forums that I practice in a particular forums, we keep checking their notices very often to know if there are any change in drafting rules or not. But I would suggest, if you are practicing in particular forums, please be updated by that itself. I am extremely sorry. I'm not aware of any particular website as such. But if you
Okay.
want, I can look up to that and also let Malvika know about it.
Okay, so which means that for new drafting rules or if there is any change in the format, one should always be updated if you're practicing at NCLT, so you should keep an eye on their website.
Yes. Because every time it's uploaded in their notice sections. There'll be no court notices or new notices, and then there'll be an update given.
Okay. And the last question, I hope the last question, are there any courses that you have personally done?
It's not a course, I would say, but I've attended a few webinars and seminars about drafting. There are a few that were arranged by the Bombay Bar Association. I had physically attended those. Then there's this there's this website channel or a team called Bettering Results. I had once attended a webinar from them. So there's not a particular course I have done for it. I was always interning. So during my internships, I always insisted on taking more of drafting. And I always, used to sit with my senior. I would suggest as a law student, if you're interning somewhere and if there's a particular draft that was assigned to you and you've drafted it and you've submitted, just don't leave it there. Ask your senior if he or she has any time, and just ask them if they can sit with you and discuss your draft and how you can improvise on it. So always try doing that. Even seniors appreciate it that you want to learn. So always try doing that.
Okay, Vidhi. So I think we are done with the queries. Can we end the session?
Yes, from my end.
Okay, so thank you so much, Vidhi, for such an illuminating webinar and for giving us the practical tips to improvise our drafting. It was a great learning experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me here, to the whole plea team, and for all of you participants for being patiently listening to me.
Many, many, many thanks. See you. Bye bye.